Okay, today we're going to talk to you about the picture walk strategy. When you start with your picture walk, you want to make sure that you have your big book in front of you or whatever reading material that you're going to have with your students. Today we're going to focus on a nonfiction piece. And the very first thing that you want to do is make sure that you talk about your title to your students. So you point that out, and of course you read your title, Big Book of Science Readers. We also are going to mention that today, since we were talking about making sure that we integrate our English language learners, that we have gone through and highlighted some of our harder, more tougher words for our students and gone ahead and put the Spanish version there with them. Make sure that you use another fluent speaker with them that can actually come up and pronounce them. You can always use Google, have your smartboard, your cell phone handy, anything that you have. Normally, we would go through and talk about the cover photo and what you see and ask different questions, but since this is a nonfiction piece today, we're actually going to flip to that page to actually talk about that cover. So once you go through that, you want to open it up to your table of contents, and you're going to talk about different text features with them. We've also gone through and we've translated some of the words to help with that translanguaging. And you want to make sure that you talk about all the different stories that can be found throughout the book. You want to make sure that you reference that these are titles, and we have that word in Spanish as well. You also want to make sure that you point out the page numbers, that's where they can actually find those stories. So for this one today, we're actually going to be focused on City in Motion. So we reference that this is the title, and there's your Spanish word again, and the page number where they can find it. You also want to make sure they understand that they can actually turn and see their page numbers down at the bottom. So we're going to flip to that page. So once you are here, this is when you want to start really focusing on the strategy. Making sure that you mention that, so here's our title, City in Motion. And now we start also building some of our vocabulary. Where you see our yellow stickies, that's where we will be mentioning our vocabulary words for this unit. So we have them in Spanish, and once again, use Google, use another translator. You say it in English, have them say it. They can do choral, they can, anything of that nature. Then you want to make sure you look at your photo, and you want to talk about all the things that you see inside that photo. You see buses and lights and other means of transportation, a crossing guard, big tall buildings and lights in the background. This would also be a good time to talk about the city that they live in, make those text-to-self connections. And also, you can have your smartboard handy, and you can talk about maybe a time that you went to another city. This is a picture of me and a friend who went to New York City, and we can reference that the pictures are almost alike, all the big tall buildings and lights in the background and all the new ways of transportation. So you want to make sure that you mention those things. You also want to make sure that you mention the author who writes the story, and that these are going to be photos instead of illustrations.
Okay, so at this point, we'll turn the page and we'll actually get started with the picture walk. And it's really important to remember that we just want to take our time focusing on all of the photographs in this story, taking a close look at them and asking questions about connections. What does this remind you of? Do you have a text-to-self, text-to-text, text-to-world connection? Those types of things. We want to look at all of the pictures. We want to start building that vocabulary that can help them later on when we read the story. On this page, we might talk about there's a train. Have you ever been on a train before? Does the train move slow? Does it move fast? Those sorts of things. At the bottom, we have a picture clue. That is above the word, so that gives us a clue about what that word might be when we do read the story. And we also have a vocabulary word listed, and again, we have it in Spanish and in English. And like Jenny said, if your students want to echo read, they want to choral read, you know your students, you know what they feel comfortable doing, and you can decide from there. On the next page, we have a picture of a child riding a bicycle. I'm sure there's lots of connections with that you can discuss. Maybe this gentleman is his father. It looks like he's going on a jog while the little child rides the bicycle. Just making connections again, talking about everything that you see in the picture. That's very important. Again, we have a picture clue of what that word might be, and then we also have a vocabulary word, again in Spanish and in English. On this page, we take a closer look at the type of questioning that you might use and some of the background knowledge that you might tie into this. We might start off by saying, what is this, first of all? What is this vehicle called? Who drives it? What is it used for? What does it look like? What are some of the things that you might see on it? What does it sound like? We might talk about the setting. Where does this story take place? We can look at the clues in the story. It's a darker hue, so maybe that is a clue that it's nighttime. We're obviously outside. We see trees. We see buildings. All of those clues that can help us with the story. We also want to talk about integrating a little bit of social studies into this lesson. This is a great opportunity to do that. We can talk about community helpers. A firefighter is a community helper. And maybe if you have a text-to-text connection. Boys and girls, this book reminds me of another book that we've read. You can pull out that book and reference that. On this page, they talk about how a firefighter is a community helper, so you can tie that in. Thank you. You could also, if you really wanted to get crazy, you could do a virtual field trip to a firehouse. You could have firefighters come to the school and give a lesson there. My son has lots of fire truck toys. You could always use this on the playground and let the students play with that any chance that you can, so that they could keep using those vocabulary words throughout the day. On this page, again, we can take a closer look at the types of questioning that we might ask. What do you think is happening in this picture? What is this? That's a big thing. We live in the South. We don't have a lot of opportunities for that, so a lot of our students are probably not familiar with those terms. Again, the setting. Are we inside? Are we outside? What season is it? Are we in the city? Are we in the country? Lots of different types of questionings. What do you think might happen next? It looks like they're kind of going down. Are they happy? Are they sad? Again, we have a picture clue that can help us with that word. On this page, we have a really cool picture of a plane, so we can talk about if our students have had any experiences going on an airplane before. And then we have our vocabulary word, again in Spanish and in English. And our last page, just focus on that picture. Looks like we have children rollerblading. We can talk about helmets, knee pads, hanging out with friends outside. There's lots of different connections that you can tie in at this point.
All right, and then before you actually want to start the reading, we have also made an anchor chart for our students. So before we actually begin reading and going into it, we want to make sure that we go over a review of the vocabulary again. So we would make sure that they know that this is our title once again. And then we have gone through and listed all of their vocabulary words down the side in blue, and we've done the Spanish version in orange right beside them, and also given them a picture clue beside each one to help them remember. One thing that we also decided is that with the word flies, since it's a multi-meaning word, this would be a good opportunity to bring in that it not only means that an airplane can fly, but also that we have flies. And we reference that, but right here we also put an X through it so they would know that it doesn't go along with this story, but it's a great time to be able to start bringing in those multi-meaning words. And that is a picture walk.
Thank you very much.